At 82 years old, Robert De Niro is living a life he never expected. A new baby, a devastating loss, and a confession that revealed something the world had never heard from him before. The man who terrified audiences as a mob enforcer. The man whose stare alone could end a scene. The man twice crowned with an Academy Award for performances that redefined what acting could be. Now spends his nights doing something no one ever imagined for him. But this is not a comeback story. 2 years before that baby was born, Robert De Niro stood in front of cameras and made a confession that revealed something far darker than anyone expected. He admitted that he had failed, not as an actor, as a father, as a grandfather. And just weeks after his youngest daughter was born, the same week the whole world was celebrating Robert De Niro, new dad at 79, another phone call came. This one wasn't good news. This one was about his grandson. This is the story Hollywood didn't put on magazine covers. This is what Robert De Niro is really carrying. At 82 years old with a baby in one arm and a grief he still hasn't processed in the other. Robert De Niro was born in 1943 in Greenwich Village, New York. His father, Robert De Niro Sr., was a respected painter, part of the New York School of Abstract Expressionists. His mother, Virginia Admiral, was a poet and painter too. Both were part of New York's bohemian art world, a world of galleries, ideas, and creative freedom that most American children of the 1940s never came close to. But it was also a broken home. His parents separated when Robert was just 2 years old. His father, who struggled privately with his identity in an era that offered him no space to be open about it, eventually moved away, splitting his time between New York and Paris, often distant, often absent. Robert was raised primarily by his mother in a small apartment, surrounded by books and paintings, but without the steady presence of his father. He was quiet, sickly child, skinny, asthmatic. The other kids in the neighborhood called him Bobby Milk because of how pale he looked. He didn't speak much, he watched. Teachers described him as withdrawn, almost invisible in classrooms, the kind of child adults forget even in the room. But on the rare occasions he was asked to perform. In school plays, something changed. That watching, that quiet, careful observation of people would one day become the foundation of the greatest acting career of his generation. But first, like so many of the men in this story, he had to disappear into someone else to be seen at all. By the late 1960s, Robert De Niro was working with a young, hungry director named Martin Scorsese. Nobody knew it yet, but the partnership would change cinema forever. Mean Streets in 1973 introduced the world to a new kind of intensity. Then Taxi Driver in 1976, a performance so raw, so disturbing that the line, "You talking to me?" became part of the language itself. An improvised moment born from De Niro studying real cab drivers and street veterans for months before filming even began. And then in 1980 came Raging Bull, a role for which De Niro first trained as an actual boxer for nearly a year, sparring competitively before deliberately gaining over 60 pounds, eating his way across Italy and France to physically transform into a washed-up, broken man in his 40s. He won the Oscar for that. He had already won one Oscar years earlier for The Godfather Part 2, playing the young Vito Corleone with such quiet menace that critics struggled to find words, despite speaking almost entirely in Sicilian dialect that he learned specifically for the role. 2 Oscars, 7 nominations, a filmography that includes Goodfellas, The Deer Hunter, Heat, The King of Comedy, Casino, films that film schools still study scene by scene, frame by frame. But behind the immersion, behind the disappearing into characters so completely that even his own crew sometimes forgot where De Niro ended and the role began, there was a man who, by his own later admission, struggled to do the same thing in his real life. He could become anyone on screen. At home, he often wasn't there at all. Robert De Niro has been married twice and has been in several long relationships. Across all of them, one thing remained constant. He had children and then he went back to work. His first marriage to actress Diane Abbott gave him 2 children, a daughter, Drina, whom he adopted, and a son, Raphael. That marriage ended in 1988 partly. Abbott later suggested, because of how completely De Niro's career consumed him during those years. In the years that followed, he had twin sons with model Toukie Smith, relationships that again played out largely outside the public eye, with De Niro frequently absent for long stretches while filming overseas. Then he married Grace Hightower in 1997 and they had 2 more children together, a turbulent marriage that included a divorce filing in 1999, a reconciliation, a vow renewal in 2004, and finally, in 2018, a permanent separation after more than 2 decades together. And then in 2023, at the age of 79, Robert De Niro had his seventh child, a daughter Gia. The mother was his girlfriend Tiffany Chen, a martial arts instructor more than 3 decades younger than him, whom he had met years earlier on a film set. The pregnancy had been kept so private that even De Niro himself seemed almost surprised to be talking about it, letting it slip almost casually in an interview, correcting a reporter who said he had 6 kids. 7, actually, he said. I just had a baby. The world laughed. The headlines wrote themselves. Robert De Niro died again at 79. But De Niro, when asked directly how he felt about it, said something that revealed far more than the joke did. It doesn't get easier, he admitted. I don't do the heavy lifting. I'm there. I support my girlfriend, but she does the work. A simple, almost throwaway line. And also perhaps the most honest thing Robert De Niro had ever said about fatherhood. Just 3 months after baby Gia was born, while the world was still running headlines about Hollywood's oldest new dad, Robert De Niro's phone rang with news from a different part of his family entirely. His eldest daughter, Dorina, the one he had adopted decades earlier, raised alongside his son Raphael, had a son of her own, born back in 2003. Robert De Niro's first grandchild, a boy named Leandro. Leandro had grown up around the family. He had even appeared on screen alongside his mother, playing her son in a remake of A Star is Born. Life, art, and family had quietly overlapped the way they often do in famous households. Friends described him as warm, funny, full of plans. He had recently graduated high school in Colorado and moved to New York for a theater internship. He had only been in the city for 2 days. On July 2, 2023, Leandro De Niro Rodriguez was found dead in an apartment in Manhattan. He was 19 years old. The medical examiner later confirmed the cause, an accidental overdose, fentanyl, mixed with several other substances, pills that had been sold to him on social media, disguised as something else entirely. He had taken them not knowing what was actually inside. 2 other teenagers, also 19, died from that exact same batch of pills within weeks of him. Drina De Niro posted online, grief spilling through every word. I don't know how to live without you, she wrote, but I'll try to go on and spread the love and light that you so made me feel. Robert De Niro, a man famous for never breaking character, for never breaking composure, gave one of the most quietly devastating interviews of his life. It's just a shock, he said. Never thought it would happen. And then he said the line that more than any award, more than any iconic role, may be the truest thing Robert De Niro has ever said on camera. I just then started thinking about all the things I could have, should have done, maybe with him. A man who had spent 60 years pretending to be other people, finally in front of a camera, simply being himself. And what was underneath wasn't a tough guy. It was a grandfather, grieving and full of regret. Leandro De Niro Rodriguez died on July 2nd, 2023. His 20th birthday would have been August 11th, just 6 weeks later. His aunt, Robert De Niro's other daughter from his second marriage, was at the very same time watching her father hold a newborn baby for the first time in over a decade. The same summer, the same family, a new life arriving in one branch and a young life ending in another, just weeks apart. On what would have been Leandro's 20th birthday, his mother Drina wrote online, Thank you for the happiest and most profound 2 decades of my life, little angel. I hope you are at peace. Robert De Niro did not post anything publicly that day. He has never been a man who processes grief in front of an audience. But 2 years later, when 5 men were finally arrested and charged in connection with the pills that killed Leandro, reporters asked De Niro once again how the family was doing. He paused for a long moment before answering. You never get over it, he said quietly. You just learn to carry it. For Robert De Niro, the arrest reopened a wound that had never really closed. But those close to him say something has changed in him these last few years, something quieter. He is, after all, raising a small child again, at an age when most men have long since stopped, long since become great-grandfathers, long since handed the active parenting over to someone else entirely. Central Park strolls, swing sets, sleepless nights, a man in his 80s learning for what may be the final time, what it means to be needed by someone small. People who have spent time with him recently describe a man who is for the first time in decades present, not disappearing into a role for months at a time, not vanishing into research, into transformation, into someone else's life, just there. Maybe that's what the line, all the things I could have, should have done really meant. Not as an excuse, as a decision. Robert De Niro is, by any measure, one of the greatest actors who has ever lived. Two Oscars, a career spanning over 50 years, performances that will be studied for as long as cinema exists. And yet, the story that defines him now isn't on screen at all. It's a phone call about a grandson he didn't get the chance to know better. It's a confession, quiet, almost reluctant, that the man who could become anyone, anywhere on camera had spent a lifetime being somewhere else when it mattered most. And it's a baby girl, asleep in a crib in New York, whose father is 82 years old, and who, for the first time in his life, doesn't seem to be in a hurry to leave the room. Some men get a second act in their careers. Robert De Niro may have just gotten one in his life.